Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, it is so great to have you. I'm Antoinette, a New Zealander living in Germany. Living abroad is amazing, but it can be very bittersweet in the way that when I'm here in Germany, I am often missing things about New Zealand and vice versa. When I travelled back to New Zealand recently with my family, I found myself missing certain things about Germany. So in this video today, I'm going to be talking about some of the things I missed about Germany when I was recently visiting New Zealand. So before I get into that, I would like to take a moment to thank NordVPN for partnering with me in this video today. NordVPN has the fastest, most reliable VPN service out there, and as a New Zealander living in Germany, this has been an incredible way for me to stay connected to New Zealand culture and to help me keep up to date with everything going on in New Zealand while living in Germany. A VPN is essentially a browser extension. You can use it on your computer and it tricks your browser into thinking you're in a different country. It also has data protection and keeps your online activity safe and private, protecting you from identity theft, which is particularly important if you're browsing in public places like airports, for example. With just one click, I have instant access to New Zealand news channels, to documentaries, to movies, to TV series. I can keep up to date with New Zealand pop culture, current events, you name it. This has also been a really useful tool for my children's bilingual speech development and their cultural identity, because they have access to New Zealand media. They can watch New Zealand kids shows and movies. They get to learn a little bit more about New Zealand culture, and some of these programs give them exposure to Kiwi English. So they get to hear the New Zealand accent, which is something they don't get to hear a lot of when they're living in Germany, apart from when I'm speaking to them. So if NordVPN sounds like something you might be interested in exploring, I will leave a link for where you can check it out in my description below. My link will give you access to a 2-year plan with an exclusive deal plus 4 bonus months free. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Okay guys, so let's jump right into it. In no particular order, something that I missed so much when I was in New Zealand were the German roads and the drivers in Germany. So let me explain. Driving in New Zealand is a very different experience to driving in Germany. Obviously it's on the other side of the road, that throws you off a lot. My husband was driving the whole time that we were in New Zealand, and we made a huge road trip from Auckland to Hawke's Bay, which takes about 5.5 hours. I hadn't been to New Zealand for so long, so I had kind of forgotten what the New Zealand roads were like. And I was in for a little bit of a shock, to be honest. I was on edge for most of the trip from Auckland to Hawke's Bay, mainly because it was just so windy and the roads were super narrow, and some of the roads were very bumpy. I feel like the roads in Germany in general are just much safer. They are wider, they are smoother, and they're less windy. It's not just because of the roads that I feel unsafe in New Zealand, it is because of the drivers. So in Germany you actually have to be 18 to get your driver's license, and in New Zealand the age is 15. Actually I think it's changed to 16, but that's still quite a bit younger than 18. And in Germany you have to take professional lessons, so you have to do hours and hours of lessons in a classroom just to pass your theory test, and then your practical test. Every single lesson is done with an instructor, like a professional instructor who actually knows what they are doing. In New Zealand, on the other hand, getting your driver's license is super chilled. It is not very expensive, it costs a couple of $100. You just kind of study for your theory test at home and you do this like little scratch test and you've passed your learners, and then anyone can teach you how to drive. It can be your uncle, your dad, your mum, whoever, and then if you feel like you are up to scratch, you can go and take a test and you're handed your restricted license, and then you have to drive for a little bit more, get a little bit more experience, and then you're tested for your full license, and it's pretty much as simple as that. Because of that, the drivers aren't as experienced, and there are a lot of car accidents in New Zealand, and you see a lot of stupid drivers, people speeding and doing silly things, and just drivers that are not up to scratch. Okay, so moving on, another thing that I miss about Germany Germany when I am in New Zealand are the straight to the point, no beating around the bush conversations, and the greetings and the goodbyes, they are just so much easier in Germany. I often talk about the fact that New Zealanders are just so warm and friendly and open, and this is something I absolutely love about New Zealand culture and New Zealand people. But sometimes New Zealanders have a hard time getting to the point in a conversation, and sometimes it takes a long time for you to actually kind of figure out what somebody's wanting to say. And sometimes goodbyes can take hours. German conversations are typically just straight to the point, no wasting anyone's time, no beating around the bush. I'm trying to think of an example. Just say something has broken down in your house and maybe you need to borrow a hammer or something like that from a neighbor. And in Germany, you just go over to that neighbor and you'd say hello, and then you just get straight to the point and say like what has happened and ask if you could borrow a hammer. But in New Zealand, the same situation. You would go over to a neighbor and then you'd have to ease into the conversation and say, hey, how are you today? And yeah, the weather's been not so great. And then you start talking about politics. Then you'd ask them how their uncle is. So once you've got all of that small talk out of the way, it would be safe to raise the issue of the hammer, and you'd say something like, oh, I was just wondering if it would be possibly okay if I borrowed a hammer from you. And then you'd explain what had happened, and then you'd say, oh, it's okay if you don't have one. No, it's totally fine if you don't. Yeah, it's just a Kiwi thing to do, to beat around the bush and not get straight to the point. I know not all New Zealanders are like this, but so many of us are. We love a good yarn, we love beating around the bush, and it's nice, but after living in Germany, oh my goodness, just get to the point sometimes, seriously. Okay, so something else I missed about Germany when I was in New Zealand was the international awareness of the people. I'm not going to say all New Zealanders, because this is not the case for all New Zealanders, but some New Zealanders are not very interested in the rest of the world. They are just very happy and content in their own little New Zealand bubble. They're not interested in anything else really that goes on in the world apart from just what is happening in New Zealand. Many New Zealanders are not interested in learning languages, they're not interested in other cultures, they're just interested in what is going on in New Zealand, and that makes conversation kind of limiting. I found it a little bit disappointing, to be honest, because not with everybody, but with some people, when I was back in New Zealand, I just found that our conversations just kind of fell flat, because it was just always me trying to think of questions to ask them. When it's just a one-sided conversation and all you're talking about is them and they're not interested in your life or anything about, you know, where you live, it just kind of gets a little bit exhausting, the conversation, and you're just like, I don't know. I just feel like here in Germany, people tend to be a little bit more internationally aware, and maybe it has something to do with the fact that Germany is located in the centre of Europe, and Germany is surrounded by so many different countries and cultures, and people are just a lot more interested in other cultures, not just the German culture and Germany. I feel like when I'm talking to Germans, they are interested in New Zealand and they're asking me questions, and many Germans know a lot about New Zealand, and it's not like I want to talk about New Zealand all the time, but it's nice just to have that little token question sometimes about your country. I have to say, even as a New Zealander, I personally have always been really interested in other countries and cultures. I may not have known a lot specifically about Germany, but it's something, of course, I learnt about later, but I've always been open to learning about other countries and cultures. I just feel like not all New Zealanders, but some New Zealanders are very much occupied with their own little bubble, and they're not interested in anything else outside their country or their hometown, for that matter. Okay, so another thing I missed about Germany when I was in New Zealand was the architecture and the beautiful historical buildings and the little cobblestone streets. There's no denying that New Zealand is an absolutely beautiful country, maybe even the most beautiful country in the world as far as natural beauty. New Zealand is a very young country, and for that reason many of the buildings and just the architecture is just lacking in history and culture, and I don't know, New Zealand is amazing for other reasons, but I just missed that culture when I was in New Zealand. The castles and the historical architecture, I just missed those things a little bit when I was in New Zealand. So guys, I am going to wrap this video up here. As usual, I have so much more that I want to talk about, which I will have to save for another video because I am running out of time. Just before I go, I would like to remind you that if you are interested in checking out NordVPN, I will leave a link for where you can do so in my description below. If you use my link, you will have access to a 2-year plan with an exclusive deal plus 4 bonus months free. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. I would love you to consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram, and I will see you again really soon. Bye!